Hi, how's it going? This is President. I'm Collinwood for YouTube. Here with a video for you guys and gals, a movie review. I'm here to review one of my favorite Western movies ever, Sergio Kabuki's The Great Silence. Um, for those who have never come to my channel or maybe coming to here for the first time, I cover a lot of dark shadows and horror topics, but you may see from time to time I cover westerns. Usually, I do this with my buddy Butch Rosenbaum. Huge shout out to him. Um, but I decided to do this one by myself for one specific reason. A, I love this movie. B, it's a snow western. Usually, I obsessed with desert westerns. Usually, when you watch a western, the from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s, you'll see a lot of desert or plain scenery, meaning the Great Plains. Not that westerns are specifically set in the desert, but most of them are. There are exceptions to this rule, and this movie definitely is an exception to the rule. It is not set in a desert wasteland or even a desert itself. No, The Great Silence is a snow western, and yes, you heard me correctly, a snow western. This is literally set and filmed in the snow, and it is a beautiful movie to watch. From the way Sergio starts this, showing the uh, protagonist Silence riding his horse through the snow. You get a bit of a close up. They pull the camera back. Great job by Sergio Kabuki. He does an amazing job, not just with the cinematography of the movie, because that's amazing to me. Um, I love Sergio Leone, but I think Kabuki learned a lot from not only learned a lot from Leone, but kind of did a bit of a better job with his cinematography than Leone. You could tell the student learned a lot from the master, if you will, but he also mastered his own art and his own storytelling. And I think that's what I love most about this movie too, is that this is not a Leone Western. It it even looks like its own Western. It doesn't quite look like a Leone Western would look. And Leone Westerns, yes, they're spaghetti Westerns, and you do have that in that movie. But what you really have here is Sergio Kabuki uses one thing that I often feel, though Leone sets his movies in the West and in deserts, and I again, a little joke here in this channel that me and Butch have had is that, look, Butch once asked me, "Do you sleep?" And I said, "Yes, I sleep. How else am I to dream of desert?" Because I love deserts. I love sand. I think it's awesome looking. I think it's beautiful looking scenery. I've never actually been to one, but I think it's very, very beautiful. Now, that being said, I can also appreciate when there isn't a desert in the movie, when it's something else, when it's a plane, for example. For another movie that's an example, um, is a movie with Robert Duvall and Kevin Costner, that where they're cattle rust they're not cattle rustlers, they're herding cattle off a grazed land, and I forget the name of the movie right at this moment, but it's a movie me and Butch did cover on this channel, and that movie is not set in the desert, if you will. It's set in the plains. Again, this movie is not set in the desert; it's set in the snow. And what Sergio Kabuki does so masterfully, just like you do see in westerns, he uses the snow as a storytelling device within his film. The guns, if you don't keep them warm enough, they'll freeze. And you also see a later on that when they bury the dead, it's not just to just bury them. Sometimes it's to make sure their bodies aren't decomposing. So they'll bury them within the snow, or they'll keep them packed in snow because it's cold. It's so cold, the bodies aren't decomposing. And this is done by Klaus Kinski's character, who is the antagonist of this film. Um, And again, I think this movie is full of interesting characters too. That's another thing, including the sheriff, who I'm going to get into here, but who's hired to who's ordered by the governor, if you will, or whatever he is in this movie to stop the bounty hunting, stop the he's had enough of people killing for money because that's what he feels is it's not just what he feels is going on, it's what he knows is going on. Now, I want to get to so many things in this movie, and I'll get to the ending of this movie, which I know some people find controversial. I don't, but I'll get into that within this film. So Sergio Kabuki does a great job using the snow element in his story. He makes it matter, not just in the bounty hunters, but the people who are losing loved ones to the other bounty hunters who are hunting the bandits down, if you will. And I use that term rather loosely. Um, in fact, that's one of the women delivers a quote I can't repeat. I won't. I can't exactly memorize. I haven't memorized every line in this movie, but it's about silence, and it's so damn good. It's creepy. It's like holy shit. This guy's really fast with a gun. Klaus Kinski's character is also fast with a gun. It's what sets up the duel a bit of a duel later. Um, I just think from start to finish, this movie is very beautiful. And something too, you have to understand the bandits are not the only ones who are about survival, too. Yes, they are about survival, but a lot of the people who live up in these mountains or living in the Utah mountains are about survival. That's something this movie gets into a bit too, really heavily. That the people who live up here really have to either form sort of a crew, or if they're by themselves they have to be very mindful, and that's something this movie really does very well too. When the sheriff does arrive, he actually arrives to a welcoming committee of hungry bandits, and what do? They don't want to kill him, they want his horse for meat. And again, this is just another storytelling element Kabuki, uh, Sergio, introduces into this film that is really, really well done. Because when you see people eating later and silence always kills somebody in self-defense. He's never the aggressor in the story, but he dispenses justice when he is called upon. And that's something too in this movie. This gives that explanation. Is silence a take on previous Western characters like the Man with No Name? In a sense, you can make that case, but I would say I think silence is a lot more efficient. Though I know, again, I'm going to get into the ending of this movie. I know I'm getting there because he doesn't talk. I think that's what makes this movie work. Where we've had up to this point with westerns protagonists that John Wayne has played, that James Stewart has played, that my favorite actor Henry Fonda has played, they've played characters that have been shades of gray. But this time Henry Fonda played a villain in Once Upon a Time in the West, which is my favorite western ever. But a lot of those characters, every one of those protagonist or an antagonist, talked. In this movie, The Great Silence is exactly what this was. The protagonist of this movie, Silence, does not talk. And you could say, well, silence is this something they're calling him because he doesn't talk, and you would not be wrong. That's exactly why they call him Silence. He does not talk. Wherever he goes, a deathly silence follows. Right? What an amazing, amazing movie. And I'm going to give Klaus Kinski a lot of flowers here. What an amazing, underrated, in my mind, underappreciated actor. He is so focused and driven in this movie, and any movie he's ever really been into. Klaus is such a great antagonist in movies, in westerns. He's been in a couple of them. He's been in more than a couple of them, but he's been in many westerns. He's been in movies where he's played villains or heels, if you will. But this, to me, is his best. You really are intrigued by his character. He's in it for the money, like other men are, but he also shows you he's full of deceit, he's full of lies, where listen, as long as he's getting paid, he's going to bring you in. Alive does not matter to him specifically. He just wants the money. And long before Ted DiBiase ever became the $1 Million Man, this movie really emphasized, hey, everybody's got a price. And I love that about it most, because it brings the corruption to the forefront of the story, the greed of men and people in general. Now, there are people in this movie who aren't like that. They just want vengeance or some sort of justice, a la Enter Silence, when he's being recruited by the one woman whose husband, I believe, gets murdered by Klaus Kinski's character. You also have, and again, to get into the ending of this movie, because I don't want to be so long-winded, for those who have never seen The Great Silence, I hope you're sitting down. The Great Silence has an ambiguous ending. Now, for those who don't know what that means, ambiguous means they go with the bad ending, where Silence dies. Silence dies at the end of the theatrical version of this movie, if you've ever seen it. Now, do I have a problem with them going with that route? No. And I'm going to tell you why. Number one, not every story is meant to have a happy ending. Number two, it fits this movie. It fits what's going on with the sheriff. The sheriff really hasn't made a decision one way or the other throughout the movie, whether he's actually going to enforce the damn law in this town. Whereas, and I'm going to get it, I'll hold that thought, but he says about it, but it's like, is he going to enforce it? You're sort of left with that question. And now in the ambiguous ending here, the sheriff does not come back. So Silence is left to face Klaus Kinski and a group of men by himself. His hand is shot. He goes to draw with his other hand. He's shot down and he's killed by Klaus Kinski and his men. That's the ambiguous ending. Now, some people are going to say that's horrible. Why would Sergio Kabuki do that? I'm going to defend Kabuki here. Yes, he often zigs when he should zag, and that is something he does. Now, am I in complete favor of this ending? No, because as somebody who owns the Blu-ray, I put the good ending on with this movie, because you can do that. And what I'll say to that is, before I get into the good ending, is why I understand Kabuki's decision here is for one reason. You have to understand, the only time you really saw an ambiguous ending in Westerns is when it maybe was a historical Western, like the Alamo. You know what's going to happen when you watch a movie about the Alamo. Or, a movie where that's a part of history, it's going to end bad. This has nothing to do necessarily with actual history. You have a lot of fiction going on, and Westerns didn't necessarily have a bunch of bad endings in films. And for Kabuki to make this call, number one, I feel it's gutsy. I feel it was ballsy as hell to make that decision. Now, I said I'm not necessarily in favor of this ending. I prefer the good ending because to me, it makes sense too. It makes a little more sense than the bad ending. But does the bad ending does it make no sense? No, it doesn't make no sense. It makes sense when you're watching a movie and you're watching the characters very carefully and the decisions they're making or the decisions they're not making. What's really going on from the money standpoint. Does it make more sense to have the good ending? I would say yes. because of one specific character, the governor himself. But you also have to see it from, I do think you have to see it from Kabuki's sort of viewpoint. Okay, how is the governor really going to come up and enforce the law when his own sheriff isn't necessarily completely, a man who he just sent up there, who may or may not enforce it at all? And you sort of, once you sort of come to your own conclusion with that answer, you understand the ambiguous ending a lot more than what you should, or maybe what you know, if you don't understand it. I hope that helps you understand it. Now, to get into the good ending, the alternate ending, which I will leave a link in the description box for those who have never seen the good version, is the sheriff does decide to help Silence and enforce the law, and he returns and he and Silence defeat Klaus Kinski and his men, and he helps the sheriff makes Silence his deputy to help enforce the law of the land. That is the good ending that a lot of people have not seen of this masterful, masterful movie. Is Silence the greatest Western character to never live to see a sequel? I'm going to say yes, he is. He really is. But once you add that ending, either ending, is there really need for a sequel? And I would say no. And yes, you could say it clearly about the ambiguous ending because Silence character gets killed off theatrically. But even when you add the good ending and you go with that, where do you go from there? He's just going to enforce the law and be the deputy for the rest of his life. Now, could Silence have gone on other adventures? Sure, but that's not where Kabuki went with that. I wish he would have. Yes. I will also say, you know, I love Once Upon a Time in the West, and Ennio Morricone scored that movie too, and I love that score. But I gotta say, The Great Silence may have in my opinion, has the best Ennio Morricone Western score ever. I know you probably hear that a lot about him, and that's not wrong, but this isn't wrong either. The Great Silence is his best score ever, and that's my opinion. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Link to the alternate ending, the good ending of The Great Silence, will be in the description box. You'll see what I'm saying if you go check it out. Go own this on Blu-ray. Again, if you have a movie that you like that has a ambiguous ending, that doesn't make the movie bad. For example, look at Season of the Witch. Season of the Witch has an ambiguous ending. John Carpenter's The Thing. Who's the thing, right? It leaves you with a question more so than an answer, but you could make the case it has a bit of an ambiguous ending, in my opinion. And again, directors making that call, it's not an easy call to make. So, and it's a different kind of decision, and I respect it, but I respect Sergio's decision to make it. Again, I love the character of Silence. I think he's an intriguing character, but I also think, you know, where were they taking that character if they would have went with the good ending from a theatrical sense? They were making him a deputy. So this quite wasn't The Man with No Name in a sense of he was going to go to other towns, if you include the good ending. Now, could he have? Yes. Could Kabuki have continued that? Also, too, you got to think, where were Westerns heading at this point? I think a lot of directors who were doing Westerns were slowly starting to see the writing was on the wall for them. Though Star Wars would come around and people would start to miss Westerns heavily, and that's why, because Star Wars is an outer space Western. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know you guys' thoughts on The Great Silence.